Look, if you're driving a 18-wheeler through the Nebraska plains at 3 a.m., the road starts to do things to your mind. They call it highway hypnosis. The white lines become a rhythm, the engine hums a lullaby, and the world outside your windshield stops being real. But there's a specific stretch of tarmac between North Platte and the Wyoming border that isn't on any Rand McNally map. We call it the ghost lane. And if you see a neon sign glowing with a pale electric blue light in the middle of a cornfield where there shouldn't be a building for 50 miles, you keep your eyes on the road and you do not, under any circumstances, touch your brakes. My name is Jackson. I've been a long-haul trucker for 22 years. I've hauled everything from hazardous chemicals to frozen poultry across all 48 lower states. I drive a 2024 Peterbilt 38.9 with a Cummins X15 engine, a beautiful chrome-heavy rig that I call the Iron Lady. I'm a professional. I don't believe in ghosts, and I don't believe in cursed roads. I was hauling a refrigerated load of pharmaceuticals heading towards Salt Lake City. It was a cold, dry Tuesday. I just fueled up at a Love's travel stop and checked my tires. Everything was green. My ELD electronic logging device showed I had 4 hours left on my clock before I hit my mandatory break. Around 02:15 a.m., the fog rolled in. It wasn't normal Nebraska fog. It was thick, smelling of wet asphalt and something metallic, like burnt copper. My high beams were useless, just reflecting off a white wall. I slowed down to 45 Menifurf, my eyes straining to catch the reflectors on the shoulder. That's when the radio started acting up. My CB was tuned to Channel 19, the trucker's channel. Usually it's full of bear reports or just guys complaining about the weather, but tonight it was silent. Then a voice broke through the static. It wasn't a trucker. It sounded like an old-timey radio announcer, the kind with that mid-Atlantic accent from the 1940s. Coming to you from the Blue Light Diner, where the coffee is hot and the miles never end. We see you, Peterbilt. We see those chrome stacks. Why don't you pull over and rest those tired eyes? I gripped the wheel, my knuckles turning white. Funny guy, I muttered, thinking it was some prankster with a powerful base station. I reached out to turn the CB off, but the knob was stuck, not jammed. It was like the plastic had fused to the metal casing. I looked at my odometer, 42,390 miles. I looked back 5 minutes later, 42,390 miles. I was doing 50 min of hay, but the numbers weren't moving. I checked my GPS, the Garmin diesel. The screen was a solid glowing blue. No map, no route, just a single sentence in the center of the screen, recalculating Seoul. Then the fog parted for just a second. Up ahead, on the right-hand side, was a glow. It wasn't the warm yellow of a standard truck stop. It was a harsh, flickering blue, the color of an arc welder's spark. A sign emerged from the dark, the Blue Light Diner, open forever. I shouldn't have stopped. Every instinct in my gut told me to floor it. But then the Iron Lady's engine sputtered. The Cummins X15, a motor that can pull 80,000 pounds over the Rockies without a hiccup, just died. The power steering went stiff, and the air brakes started to hiss as the pressure dropped. I coasted into the gravel lot of the diner, the rig coming to a silent, heavy stop right in front of the large plate glass windows. The diner looked like a classic 1950s car hop, but the chrome was rusted into jagged teeth, and the blue neon light hummed with a sound that made my teeth ache. I sat in my cab, my heart hammering against my ribs. I reached for my cell phone, no service. I looked into the diner. There were people inside, or things that looked like people. They were sitting in the booths, their heads perfectly synchronized, turning slowly toward my truck. They didn't have faces, not really. Their skin looked like it was made of the same gray fog that was swirling outside. And then, the passenger door of my truck, which was locked, clicked open. The smell hit me first. It was the smell of a stagnant pond, mixed with the ozone of a lightning strike. A voice came from the empty passenger seat. It was the same voice from the radio. "You're late for your shift, Jackson. The road has been waiting." I looked at the seat. There was nobody there, but the seat cushion was depressed, as if someone or something was sitting right there, looking at me. The air in the cab became so cold that my breath started to crystallize on the steering wheel. That invisible weight on the passenger seat shifted, and I heard the sound of leather creaking, like someone leaning closer to whisper in my ear. "The toll isn't paid in cash, Jackson. It's paid in time, and you're centuries behind schedule." I didn't wait for whatever was sitting there to touch me. I grabbed my heavy maglite, the 6-cell D battery version that's basically a lead pipe, and swung it at the empty air of the passenger seat. It hit nothing but cold mist. I scrambled out of the driver's side door, tumbling onto the gravel lot. The gravel didn't sound like rocks. It sounded like crushed glass and bone. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I stood up, my knees shaking. I looked back at the Iron Lady. My beautiful Peterbilt was covered in a layer of gray frost, and the chrome was turning black, as if it were being aged 100 years every second. I had to get inside the diner. I didn't want to, but the fog outside was closing in, and I could see shapes moving in the mist-tall, spindly things with too many joints, pacing the perimeter of the parking lot. I pushed open the door to the blue light diner. A bell chimed, but the sound was distorted, like a slowed-down recording of a scream. The interior was a nightmare of the 1950s. The checkered floor was stained with something dark and oily. The jukebox in the corner was playing a record, but the needle was dragging, creating a low, guttural moan that vibrated in my chest. There were 4 people sitting at the counter. They were wearing trucker hats and flannel shirts, but their skin was the color of a bruised plum. They didn't have eyes, just smooth, hollow sockets filled with that flickering blue neon light. They were all holding coffee mugs, but when they tilted them back, the liquid that came out was thick and black like engine oil. "Sit down, Jackson," a woman's voice said. I turned. Behind the counter stood a waitress. Her name tag read Mabel, but her face was a shifting blur of different women. One second she was young and blonde, the next she was an old woman with skin like parchment. "I just need to get back on the road," I stammered, my hand gripping the mag light so hard my knuckles bled. "My truck died. I need a jump." Mabel laughed. It sounded like glass breaking in a metal bucket. "Honey, the road you were on doesn't exist anymore. You took the exit for loop 7014. This is where the miles go to die." She slid a plate across the counter. On it was a single silver key. It wasn't a truck key. It was an old skeleton key, the kind used for Victorian mansions. "That's your room key," she said, her shifting face settling on a terrifying, toothless grin. "The interstate is full tonight. You're staying in the sleeper ward." I looked at the back of the diner. A long hallway stretched out, much longer than the building should have been. It looked like the interior of a sleeper cab, but expanded to an infinite length, with doors lined up on either side as far as the eye could see. Suddenly, the CB radio on the counter, an old Cobra 29, erupted into life. "Breaker, breaker. If you eat the food, you're part of the menu. Look at the clock, Jackson. Look at the clock." I looked at the clock above the grill. It didn't have numbers. It had years. The hands were spinning wildly. 1944, 1982, 2026, 2110. I realized then that everyone in this diner was a driver who had pulled over throughout the last century. The man to my left was wearing a leather flight jacket from Wee. The man to my right had a disco-era perm and a keep-on truckin' patch. They weren't eating. They were being preserved. "I'm leaving," I said, backing toward the door. "You can't," Mabel whispered, her eyes turning into bright blue searchlights. "You haven't checked your logs." She pulled out a massive leather-bound logbook and flipped it open. Every page was covered in my handwriting. Thousands of entries, dating back hundreds of years before I was born. October 12, 1845, hauled 40 tons of silence through the Nebraska Territory. The horses have no eyes. The blue light in the diner intensified, blinding me. The floor began to tilt, and the sound of 1,000 truck engines idling started to roar from beneath the floorboards. I dived for the door, but instead of the parking lot, I stepped out into nothing. I was falling through a tunnel of blue light, and all around me, I could hear the voices of every trucker who had ever gone missing on the interstate, all of them screaming the same thing: "Watch your mirrors. He's in the sleeper. He's in the sleeper." I slammed into something hard. I blinked, the spots clearing from my eyes. I was back in the cab of the Iron Lady. The engine was roaring. The wipers were swiping frantically. I was doing 80 MFIs in total darkness. I looked at my Garmin. It was back to normal. But then I looked in my rearview mirror. The curtain to my sleeper berth, which I always keep closed while driving, was slowly being pulled open by a pale gray hand with 8-inch fingers. I didn't turn my head. Every rule of the road tells you that if you're doing 80 on a dark interstate, you don't take your eyes off the tarmac. But my skin was crawling, and the air in the cab was thick with the scent of that stagnant pond. The hand on the curtain was long. The skin stretched so tight over the knuckles it looked like wet parchment. I could hear a wet, rhythmic breathing coming from the sleeper berth hiss. Click, hiss. "Get out of my rig," I growled, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. The curtain slid back fully. In the reflection of the windshield, I saw it. It wasn't a man. It was a tall, emaciated figure wearing a tattered trucker's jacket, but its body was made of that shifting blue fog. Its face was a smooth, featureless mask, except for a wide, jagged horizontal slit that functioned as a mouth. "Jackson," it hissed. The sound coming from the truck's own speakers. We're out of fuel. We need a spark. The thing reached forward, its fingers wrapping around my throat. Its touch was like ice water. My vision started to blur, and the truck began to veer toward the median. The rumble strips started screaming under the tires. Brrrt. I realized then what Mabel meant by paying the toll. They didn't want my truck. They wanted the drive. They wanted the life force of someone who still had miles left to go. I remembered the silver skeleton key I'd snatched from the diner's counter. I still had it clutched in my left hand. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, I didn't stab the creature. I stabbed the key into the ignition. The key didn't fit, but as soon as the silver metal touched the steering column, a massive surge of white electricity arched through the cab. The blue fog in the sleeper let out a frequency, shattering scream. The world outside exploded. The darkness shattered like glass, and for a split second I wasn't on a highway in Nebraska. I was driving the Iron Lady across a bridge made of solid light, suspended over an ocean of discarded machinery and lost souls. I slammed the brakes. The tires didn't screech. They roared with the sound of 1,000 voices. The truck spun, the trailer jackknifing with a violent metal-on-metal crash. Everything went black. The log entry, I woke up 3 hours later. The Iron Lady was parked perfectly on the shoulder of I-80, just outside of Cheyenne, Wyoming. The engine was idling smoothly. The sun was just starting to bleed over the horizon. I checked the sleeper, empty. I checked a passenger seat. There was no gray hand, no fog, but sitting on the seat cushion was a single silver skeleton key, twisted and melted as if it had been through a furnace. I walked around the rig to check the damage from the jackknife. There wasn't a scratch on the chrome, not a dent in the trailer, but when I looked at the rear of the refrigerated unit, I saw something that made me retire that very day. Dozens of handprints were pressed into the dirt and salt on the back of the trailer. They weren't human. They had 8 fingers each, and the marks were etched deep into the stainless steel, as if the metal had been melted by the touch. I work a local delivery route in a small town. I never stay out past sunset, but sometimes when I'm scanning the radio, I'll pick up a stray signal on Channel 19. It's always the same voice, that old-timey announcer. Jackson. The coffee is still hot, and we've kept your booth open. See you on the loop. If you're ever driving through the plains and you feel the miles start to repeat, if your GPS tells you to recalculate soul, don't look in the mirrors. Keep your foot on the gas and pray you have enough fuel to outrun the blue light. Because once you pull over at the diner, you aren't the driver anymore. You're the cargo.